Good Tuesday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and this is the Jerry and Jerry Show. It's great to be with you. We are live in downtown Charlottesville. We are maybe a mile, probably a little bit less than a mile as the crow flies from Scott Stadium, and we are so very excited with college football set to kick off right here in the Atlantic Coast Conference, and our proud and beloved University of Virginia football team traveling to the state of Tennessee to face a volunteer offense at a volunteer program that is absolutely dynamic. We'll talk Virginia's offensive line. We'll talk running backs by committee. We'll talk a quarterback that's yet to be tested in the ACC. And we'll talk the ACC football games on the docket that seem to stand out to us. North Carolina and South Carolina in prime time on Saturday evening, number 21 UNC, a 2.5-point favorite. And boys and girls, expansion talk in the ACC is still front and center. All those topics and more with the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, 40-plus years of covering the Virginia football program and the Atlantic Coast Conference, Judah Wickower. Let's go to the two-shot, the studio camera, then the two-shot, and let's welcome our Hall of Famer to the program. Hootie, I can taste live action, my friend.
Right around the corner, brother. It's coming fast and furious, as they say, and it's just wild. I can't believe football season's here. We've been talking about it for over a month now, and they're going to kick it off this week.
I love training camp. I love reading your coverage on JerryRatcliffe.com, the premier source for anything UVA related, JerryRatcliffe.com. But something about week one, I know we're a 28-point underdog. I know the over-under's at 56, and I think both you and I feel the Vols are going to try to eclipse 56 points here as they really try to flex their muscles in week one. But I still get excited knowing that week one is on the horizon for this Virginia football team and head coach Tony Elliott. Where do you want to start with this matchup, Hootie?
Well, I guess the main thing is Tony Elliott realizes the situation that they're in. He was offensive coordinator at Clemson for a decade, and they played in the college football playoffs, played in won 2 national championships. He knows how to coach against better, big time teams in big time atmospheres. He's been there, done that. So he probably has a little bit of edge to him that maybe some. I won't say he's a newbie head coach since he has a year under his belt, but it's nothing new to him. So even though Tennessee is a huge favorite and could win by a rout, I don't think he'll be intimidated at all. I think he realizes the situation that he's in, and he's using this as a gauge to find out just where Virginia football stands. I think most of us have a pretty good idea, and I think he probably has a pretty good idea, but compared to a team like Tennessee, who's one of the elite teams in the nation right now, top 10, top 15 in almost every poll, he's going to use this as a measuring stick to see where Virginia is, how far they have to go, what they need to do to improve as a program and be able to compete in games like this.
Logan Wells-Claylow watching the program. Peter Sweeney watching the program. Stephanie Rhodes in Keswick says, go Who's. Viewers and listeners, you can offer questions to the Hall of Famer himself, Jerry Ratcliffe, or give us some UVA perspective by putting it in the feed anywhere you are watching the program. Let's talk about the Vols. JerryRatcliffe.com's got some fantastic coverage. Correspondent Clay Meeks breaks it down on Hootie's website. Tennessee is a juggernaut. I mean, we're talking an offense that finished number 1 in points scored last year, 599 points, 46 points per game. They return a quarterback in Joe Milton III, who is got a strong arm. Your website, 6'5", 240 pounds, and this man can boogie, Hootie.
Yes, he can. And for those of us who have seen some sizable quarterbacks in the past. I know Virginia Tech had one a few years ago. His name escapes me, but he's a big dude. And not only does he possess the strongest arm in college football, and it's not even close. I mean, he can throw it 65 yards on the money in the air and not even stressing his arm. But he can also run the football, and he's a big dude. And if you got a guy that big running, that's hard to bring down. So he poses an incredible threat, and he's experienced. He's a senior. I think he was MVP of the bowl game last year when Tennessee mopped up Clemson. So that tells you what kind of an offense he's used to operating in. They lost some key personnel last year, but they've replaced some through the transfer portal and have recruited well. They've got some really good skilled players. A wide receiver, Squirrel White, he's a sophomore. He is outstanding. He had 30 catches for 481 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. He had 9 catches for 108 yards against Clemson in the Orange Bowl. But they're loaded in just about every position. And I think it's just going to be a test for John Rudzinski's defense to be able to hold these guys down, because that's the one focus that Rudzinski had in preseason training camp, was to try to keep people out of the end zone, to do better in the red zone, and to be better in third downs, get off the field, and turn the ball over to the offense. So
we'll talk Coach Rudd here in a matter of moments. He's got he's got 8 starters returning, and we're hoping the defense is going to be a strong point for the Hoos this season. Still, the Tennessee offense, Hootie, what strikes me to you and what I learned from your website, jerryratcliffe.com, this is a dynamic offense. It's very balanced. They throw the football, they run the football. Your correspondent, Clay Meeks, described it pretty well. Last year, the Vols offense, 134 of their first downs earned by rushing, 155 of their first downs earned through the air. A balanced attack. What are you watching with this defense with 8 starters returning that could either stand out to you or be a point of concern? Do you stop the run? Do you stop the pass?
Well, I think just about any defensive coordinator worth his salt is going to try to stop the run first, and I'm sure Rudzinski will do that. He's got a pretty good front 7 and a very experienced defensive line who's been pretty good against the run, and that's going to be key, because most of Tennessee's main running backs have returned, including Jalen Wright, who had 875 yards and 10 touchdowns last year, and Jabari Small, who had 734 yards and 13 touchdowns. And then another guy, a speedster, Dylan Sampson, who came on late in the season and had about 400 yards rushing and almost 7 yards per carry. So they're going to be tested early by Tennessee's running game and Joe Milton's arm. But I think that's Rudzinski's going to be his game plan, is to try to contain Tennessee's running game, because I learned a long time ago from people like George Welsh and other people that if you can control the line of scrimmage offensively, you can do pretty much anything you want to do. And if you're controlling the line of scrimmage, you're going to be able to run the football. And that's what Rudzinski doesn't want to happen, because if it does, Tennessee can not only control the line of scrimmage, they can control the tempo, the pace of the thing. They're a very fast-paced offense. I mean, they might run 40 plays a half, because they line it up and they're ready to go. So they're going to test Virginia in a lot of ways, and also test Virginia's depth. It's supposed to be a pretty warm day in Nashville, and Tennessee's going to keep running fresh bodies in and out of the game, something that Rudzinski's very aware of, and he believes his team is well conditioned. We'll see how they fare in this up-tempo game. Of course, Virginia runs an up-tempo offense as well, so they got
practice.
They get to see that in practice.
Yeah.
So, but I think the main thing is they're going to try to keep Tennessee from controlling the clock and controlling the game through the running game.
Kevin Yancey watching in Waynesboro, he says good morning. He says the game will be over by the first quarter. Kevin Yancey often very bearish in his outlook on many of the programs we do here. Holly Foster's watching the program in Henrico. She wants your opinion on Matt Gainyard, the kicker. She's watching, she read the Richmond Times-Dispatch, sent me a picture this morning of their sports page, which I am looking at right now, Holly. And in the sports page, on the front page, ex-Marine 34 living his dream as a walk-on. Right there in the RTD, an article written by one of your colleagues, Mike Barber. Questions are coming in. This one is coming in from McLean, and it's one of our headlines here. What can the Who's do against a big-time favorite in a program like Tennessee that can give them some hope moving forward for the rest of the year? That's a good question. Yeah. I know there's no such thing in big-time college football as moral victories, but we're 28-point underdogs here. What can we take from this game that can be applied to weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5 and beyond?
Well, the main thing they're going to try to do is just try to compete and not get blown out. And, the game could be over by the first quarter. But then again, it's the first game of the season.
Never know what could happen.
We've seen a lot of crazy things happen the opening weekend in football. And the one thing you can't control is turnovers. And so if they're lucky enough to force some turnovers, or Tennessee makes some mistakes, or if Tennessee's sloppy and Virginia's at the top of their game, you never know. They could still be in the game, even in the second half if they catch some breaks here and there. Again, it could be over by halftime. There's no question about that. But the main thing Virginia's going to be trying to do is just to compete and try to make a game of it, and try to go to their strengths and see what they can build on that will help them in later games. Because the worst thing you can do is go in there and get beat 56-0 or something like that and just be demoralized. They're going to be trying to build some confidence, hope to get lucky. Again, that may not happen. They could get their doors blown off. We're talking about big time football here, and Tennessee's not only going to be just trying to win the game, they're going to try to run up the score because they're trying to make a statement to the national pollsters and to impress people who wonder if they can truly contend for the SEC East title. So it's Virginia's job to go in and try to be as fundamentally sound as they can, not make mistakes, not beat themselves, and try to build some confidence, try to compete, try to make a game of it, and still be alive in the second half. That may not happen, probably won't happen, but again, you see some crazy things first week of the season. Some teams aren't in sync at that point, and that's what's something that I'm sure Tony Elliott is hoping for.
Tony Elliott's got an offensive line that's a bit banged up. And we knew coming into the season we had a couple of question marks here. We had question marks under center with the quarterback. We had question marks in the trenches with the offensive line. Injuries, unfortunately, have hit one of the question marks for UVA within the trenches in the offensive line here. You talked about this on JerryRatcliffe.com. You got a quarterback that's got no big-time college football experience, and the guys that are protecting him aren't in a particularly healthy right now. Give us your take on both.
We'll get a clearer picture of that in a couple hours because Tony Elliott's going to have his first weekly presser of the season, game week presser at 1 o'clock. I'm sure he'll give us an update on all those guys, and we'll have that on the website later this afternoon. But, that was, I guess it was several days ago when he told us about the offensive linemen, and a lot of those guys have been banged up. It's they've had a difficulty building their cohesiveness because of that, because one guy will be in one day, out the next, that sort of thing. I think that they were hoping that some of these guys would get healed up by Tennessee. They've still got a few days this week. We don't know if they've been practicing what their health status is at this point, but I'm sure that was his main concern, was having those guys ready by Saturday. One of the big left tackle, Mikael Boley from down in Mississippi, his dad was an NFL player. He started as a true freshman some last year, which is very rare to start left tackle.
He's got an ankle injury.
Yeah, he had an ankle injury. They were hoping to get him back. If they can't, Blake Steen will move into that spot for the game.
And that's a big transition from guard to tackle.
It is, but I think he's done it seamlessly from what we've heard, and has really impressed coaches in training camp. So I think they have some confidence in him, but that's a very big pressure point, because Tennessee is going to be testing him as well to see if he can handle the pass rush, because they're going to be trying to get the Muskets blindside and put as much pressure on him as they can. And you know that's going to happen, because he's first time as an FBS quarterback, first time in an atmosphere like this. He's used to playing in front of maybe 5,000 or 7,000 people. It's going to be 65,000 people. Partisan wrong color of orange as far as he's concerned. They're going to be blitzing him and pulling stunts and stuff, trying to confuse him and either put him on his back or force him into making a mistake that could lead to a turnover, which could lead to points. So Steen could be at the left tackle. Ugana Nana, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, transferred from Houston, a big dude, was at left guard. They've moved him to right tackle at this point. And some of the other guys, like Noah Josie and a couple others, were a little banged up too. And
Jimmy Christ, a transfer from Penn State.
Christ from Penn State. They're depending on all these guys to be healed and to try to be able to contain a ferocious Tennessee pass rush, because Des Kitchens, Virginia's offensive coordinator, and watching tape and also doing research on some of the Tennessee transfers that came in the offseason, caught his eye. It's a pretty ferocious bunch of guys, not like last year's Tennessee defense, which had one of the worst secondaries in the country, but a pretty ferocious bunch that knows that they're going to have to produce if Tennessee really is going to vie for the SEC title.
You're getting props right now from Liz in Nottingham. She says you are her all-time favorite sports writer. She's watching right now on LinkedIn. Ray Cadell, this show is airing live on 15 Facebook pages, is traveling to a gig right now. Ray Cadell says, I'm traveling. We're listening to you guys on the road. Big fan of both you boys. You know what? We're a big fan of the Cool Cat as well, aren't we, Hootie?
Absolutely. I've known Ray Cadell for a long time and love listening to his music, and he's just a good all-around guy. And thank you, Liz, for the kudos. Much appreciated.
Kevin Yancey bringing a little bit of a bearish take here. He's our bear on our content. There's one in every group, Hootie.
Got to have a bear.
You got to have a bear, Hootie.
I love bears.
He says, Hootie Ratcliffe, you've watched UVA a little longer than I have. How many years can they honestly expect fans to endure the overhype, underperform before they walk away? That's a tough take before the first game of the season, Kevin Yancey in Waynesboro.
Well, you know, they're going to – I mean, if anybody that's been an athlete knows that no matter what happens, you don't ever give up. You don't ever stop trying. I mean, and some teams do. We've seen a lot of Miami teams over the years just after beat down after beat down or losing a game that they shouldn't lose. Sometimes they'll just throw in a towel. I don't think these Virginia kids are like that. I think they know that they're underdogs, that they're not expected to even make a game of it. I think they're going to be somewhat inspired by the first game back since the tragedy last November. I think they're going to be playing for those slain teammates of theirs. That will only carry you so far, some of those emotions. But, they're not going to give up. I mean, they may get pummeled, but I don't think they'll quit fighting. That's one thing I noticed last year, and even the year before with some of these guys that played for Bronco, is that even if they were getting pounded, they keep playing. they keep trying to score. They keep trying to fight. I don't see this Virginia team quitting. They could get beat 50 or 60 points, but I think they'll keep trying even if they're getting beat. So I don't see them walking away at any point unless it just becomes unbearable later in the season.
Stephanie Rhodes watching the program. She says, our family, the Wells family, has been doing it for 45 years. We are diehard UVA fans through it all. We bleed orange and blue. I'll tell you what, Stephanie, I love when you watch our programs, and I love your positive mindset. Comments are coming in fast and furious. Kevin Higgins, we're going to get to you here in Greenwood in a matter of moments. We want to talk running back by committee. We give props to Bill McChesney, who's watching on McIntyre Road, and Bashir, formerly of Bashir's, the restaurant in the downtown mall, watching the program right now. I believe he lives out in Afton right now, Bashir does. Running back by committee, Hootie Ratcliffe. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, we talked to Des Kitchens about this the other day. They have a loaded running back room. Xavier Brown was nicked up. I'm not sure he'll be ready for Tennessee, but they have a bunch of other guys who are experienced backs. Paris Jones has been around for a long time. Small guy, but he started most of the games last season and probably will start Saturday against Tennessee, I would imagine. He is a kid who never thought that he was going to make it. He came in as a walk-on, earned a scholarship, fought his way into a starting position. Didn't really get much of a chance under the Bronco regime, but Tony Elliott saw something in him, perhaps because Tony was a guy that was overlooked and earned his way into playing time as a starting wide receiver for Clemson once upon a time. I think this kid plays hard. He's a fighter. They have some other guys that have experience, and one of them is Kobe Pace, who played for Clemson and played a lot for Clemson before injuries got to him last year. And he's a big-time back. He's played in big-time atmospheres. So I would expect either one of those guys to get a lot of time. You have Mike Hollins, the survivor of last November's shootings, who's been through hell and back, and we all are familiar with his story. He was shot twice. He came off the bus and then realized what was happening and turned around and ran back to the bus to try to save his teammates. Got in there and realized it was unwinnable situation. Tried to get off the bus again, got shot twice in the back from what the reports say. Went through various surgeries, fought his way back. A lot of people would have said that's the end of football for me, transferred to another school, but he wouldn't do that. He came back to make a statement that, hey, this is who I am. I'm a football player. I'm more than a football player. I want to inspire others. I'm not giving up. He came back in the spring with even in workouts before spring football, and showed incredible tenacity and fortitude, and got himself back in playing shape. Scored a touchdown in the spring game, and will play Saturday, I'm sure, out in Nashville. And so they've got a lot of guys. One of them probably doesn't stand out over the other. They all have different strengths. And unlike Bronco, who believed in letting one guy carry the load most of the game, that a guy gets stronger as the game goes on, and a lot of running backs are like that. Some of the best running backs in history, they only got stronger in the fourth quarter. But Des Kitchens doesn't think that there's a guy maybe necessarily like that in there that's heads and shoulders above the other guys, so he's going to go by committee. He'll probably test out 2 or 3 guys early, and if somebody develops a hot hand and looks like he's having a good day, they'll stick with him until he's stopped, and then maybe they'll go to somebody else. But it's going to be running back by committee until one of these guys proves that the job is his and then they can handle 25 carries a game.
Kevin Higgins in Greenwood. He's trying to put Kevin Yancey in check a little bit over here. Higgins says, Yancey, UVA went 29 years without a bowl win prior to Welsh coming on board. Look at Elliott's background and the story of his life. He will prove the naysayers wrong just like Welsh did. He said, let's give Elliott some time and a chance. I echo that mindset. I mean, we got to give this guy some runway. He's got to get his program in. He's got to get his guys in, his system in. People jumping off the Elliott bandwagon so early, I just don't understand it, Hootie.
I think a lot of it came from last year, Jerry, and the fact that there were high expectations with one of the nation's most successful offenses coming back. And Tony, and had Bronco been back another year, those expectations probably would have been met just because they knew his system, they knew how everything worked. Tony didn't know that system. His coaches didn't know that system, so they brought in their system, tried to teach it to those guys. It just didn't click for whatever reason. There's been fingers pointed at the coaches for not adjusting to the talent. There's been fingers pointed at the players for not buying in, not trying as hard, that some of them weren't capable of running a different system. So we're not quite sure who to blame for that, but I think that's where a lot of the sourness generates from, because a lot of people were expecting to go back to a bowl, put up big numbers like the year before. Instead, they go 3-7. Are picked last in the conference this year, so a lot of people feel like this staff can't win here. I think you got to give them time. You got to give any new coach 3 or 4 years, like you said, to implement his system, to get in his kind of players that fit that system, to recruit, upgrade the talent, really. And that's something that they're in the midst of. They have 16 commitments right now. There's some guys on there that they must have seen something in that I didn't see in terms of their backgrounds that we've researched. Some of the guys, though, have been recruited by really good football programs who win. So he needs more of those, and he needs to get some of those from the state of Virginia, which is a sore point, a thorn in Virginia's saddle over the last 7-8 years. But, you got to give the guy time. George Welsh won earlier than people thought he would. He came in 82. By 84, they were in the first bowl game in Virginia history and beat the Big Ten runner-up, Purdue, in a magnificent win. And he never let up from that point on. And it's a shame that that wasn't good enough for some Virginia fans. He was kind of a victim of his own success. They wanted him to take the program to a higher level and keep it there, and that's a lot easier said than done at a school like UVA. So I think Virginia fans should be satisfied if you can get a coach in here who did what George did and average 7 wins a year, every now and then have a 9 or 10 win season and play in a big bowl game. I think if Tony Elliott can get the program to that point, then it's a resounding success. If he flounders and he can't win, then certainly he'll be replaced in a couple of years down the road. But you got to give the guy a chance. Right now, when you get down in Division I FBS football, it's tough to climb back up that ladder because there's no mercy. People negative recruit against you. It's tough to get players to come into to recruit players into your system because you haven't won. So you got to give him time to see if he can turn it around. Otherwise, you're not giving him a fair chance.
We have viewers and listeners in Hampton, Virginia, Newport News, Virginia, Williamsburg, Virginia on the program right now, Lynchburg, Virginia on the show. You, the viewer and listener, can ask questions and shape the discussion by putting it in the feed, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, wherever you're watching the program. Ask some questions. We'll relay them live on air. This question comes in from Spencer, who's watching in Pennsylvania. He goes, diehard UVA fan, 1998 graduate. I completely agree with Mr. Ratcliffe about patience with Tony Elliott. We have to give Coach Elliott an opportunity to get his system in place before we hold him accountable. That's 3-4 years tops. Fans may not want to hear that, but that's how long it takes to turn this system around. Please ask Ratcliffe his thoughts on Musket. You guys have talked offensive line. Is Musket the guy to lead this team? It's a great question.
Well, he is right now because he's the only guy with experience in college football, period. I mean, you look at what's behind him, and as much as Anthony Calandria, the kid from St. Pete, has impressed with a strong arm and has got a lot of savvy. And
he's a first year with no game experience.
Yeah, I mean, he's never played a down of college football, and nobody behind him has ever played a down in college football. So Tony Musket brings years of experience in a similar system, albeit on the FCS level, and he hasn't faced anything like he's going to face Saturday out in Nashville. It could be a rude awakening for him too, but we won't know until we see him take on defenses like this in live situations. It's different than going against your own team in practice because you have an idea of their strengths and weaknesses and what you can get by with and what works. When you're playing against a team that's trying to knock your head off on every play, it's a whole lot different because they're coming after you hard. And if they hurt you, they don't really care. So you're not going to have a red shirt on with a referee blowing a whistle if somebody comes close to knocking you down in practice. So we don't know. We just don't know about Tony Musket. He's a mysterious figure for us right now. We've seen him a little bit in practice. We saw him in the spring game. He's a confident guy. He's a smart guy. But all that goes out the window if you're getting knocked on your butt every other play. So,
do you roll Musket out of the pocket? I mean, what do we do to protect this guy when we know there's injuries in the trenches? How do we keep him on his feet?
That's one way of doing it, having a floating pocket. Try to figure out where the pressure points are and let him move. I think Virginia will probably, is my guess, and I think this is one thing that's overlooked. I think these two tight ends they have, they're not superstars like Jelani Woods and Heath Miller and some of the guys like they've had in the past. They may not play it down in the NFL, but I think these two guys are really good college tight ends, and I think we might see them use these guys quite a bit in short and mid-range passing schemes. I think they'll probably throw to some of the running backs out of the backfield and try to loosen up that defense and cool down the pass rush if they can. Screens, stuff like that. But, yeah, you can roll him out of the pocket and try to remove some of the pressure.
I mean, I would imagine Tennessee is going to line up to stop the run right away. And they're going to say, Virginia football, beat us through the air. You got an offensive line that may not be the best from a pass protection standpoint. You got an unknown under center with Musket. We want to see if you can beat us in the air. We're going to stack the box.
I guarantee you just came up with Tennessee's defensive game plan. Tennessee has a tendency to stuff the box, shut down the run, force you to throw, force a young quarterback to make mistakes, turn over the ball, and
get up on the team early
and let that offense roll.
Yeah,
and that's exactly what Josh Heupel is going to be trying to do.
Comments coming in. This is from Rob Craig. We see Rob Craig often working the clock at Virginia basketball games.
Yep.
He's got this comment. This is a good one. He knows his football. He knows his athletics. Coach Welsh did everything in a completely different era. In this transfer portal, NIL era, UVA is a disaster and only falling further behind. Just getting bowl eligible this year may become a challenge for Virginia. I'll push back on that a little bit. And Rob, I love when you watch our content. I don't think this team is going to become bowl eligible this year. I don't think many people do. Virginia football dead last in the preseason poll. I think it would be a success, and it's tough for me to say this because I'm not a guy that believes in moral victories. We get 4 or 5 wins here. That's a springboard into next season here. Your thoughts on this new era, transfer portal, NIL era, UVA trying to compete against the big dogs?
If Virginia can win, if Virginia can become bowl eligible, which I don't think they will either.
We throw a parade for Tony Elliott.
Tony Elliott should, they should throw a parade right down outside your office here, down East Market Street, and name him ACC Coach of the Year, if not National Coach of the Year. The odds are stacked way against this football team. 4 wins would be
success,
a resounding success in my mind, and because nobody thinks they're going to win more than 3. Some people don't think they'll win more than 1. So if they can win 4 games, Wahoo fans should be elated, because that means probably he's going to get this thing turned around once he gets more talent in here. But George Welsh would have hated the transfer portal. He would have hated a lot of the things about
I hate
college
the transfer
football.
portal.
I hate the transfer portal. I don't mind the NIL.
I don't mind the NIL.
I don't mind that at all, but I think it should be even. It should be controlled by somebody. I know the NCAA doesn't have the guts to do it.
We should talk about
or
that.
the law, or the money to defend it in court. But
the NIL should almost be like a salary cap, like we see in sports.
Congress
in
should
pro
do
sports.
It. Yeah, they got to come up with some way for an even. It's college football is supposed to be an even playing field under the rules. The NIL does not allow that to happen. State by state has different rules. Some people you can make $1 million a year. Some people you're limited to X amount. Some schools believe in thrive on the NIL. Some schools are doing it because they have to compete. Some schools are cheating with it. We heard Jimbo Fisher and Lane Kiffin both say, and these guys are in the heart of the SEC. He said, we used to have this in the SEC. We called it cheating. And it's just legalized cheating in some places right now. And if they don't get a grip on it, they're tearing college football and college sports. They're tearing it apart. They're ruining the game. Even the Notre Dame AD said the other day, we're ruining college sports. And it's happening right before our eyes, and nobody's doing anything about it. Getting back to his point, I don't think Virginia has done a great job in the transfer portal, and there's probably some reasons why. One, NIL. They may not be able. Some of these guys are looking for a payday. Some of them need the money. Some of them don't. Some of them just want it.
Some of them don't want to go to class. That's not going to happen at UVA.
Some are getting bought by other programs. We've heard Wake Forest coach and Mac Brown at Carolina talk about their players have been offered bukus of money to come and play for other schools. They turned it down. Kudos to them for doing that. But, you're right. Some kids have to write an essay to get into Virginia. Some of them are going to say, I'm not writing an essay. I can go over here and play for this guy for $500,000 a year. I don't have to fill out an essay. I don't want to go to every class I have to take and it'd be hard and have to read a lot. It's not for everybody. And it's a smaller recruiting pool for Virginia than it is for some other schools. There are even some academic schools around the country. I'm not going to point them out right now, but some of those schools are getting a lot of exceptions in recruiting that they didn't used to get.
Right.
And I know that for a fact because I know the coaches and they've told me so. And that's not happening at Virginia. And so you're a little bit behind the 8 ball in trying to attract players from the transfer portal. Plus, a lot of guys are going to say, well, yeah, I'm looking for playing time, but if I can go get some playing time for this school, which is going to go to a bowl game as opposed to this school that won 3 games last year, I'm not sure I want to do that. So you're a little handcuffed in that regard. I'm not sure that they've done a great job in the transfer portal. I know they're trying, but you got some things stacked against you.
This question's come in, and it's a follow-up on the NIL. And Rob, I'll get to your follow-up. Stephanie, I'll get to your question. Let me go to Thomas, who's watching in the Baltimore, Maryland area. And he says, can you give us some insight into what UVA is doing with its football program from an NIL standpoint? Is there legitimate money going to these players through name, image, and likeness?
Well, we don't know because we're not privy to those numbers. We're not sure. We hear things, but you don't know what's hearsay and what's fact. They have an NIL program. They have collectives. Reese Bigman just signed a NIL deal with McDonald's, thanks to Rick Hendricks, a guy that owns a lot of McDonald's in Charlottesville and Waynesboro. Really good guy. Him and his dad have been longtime Wahoo supporters. Jonathan Cotton at the Good Feet store gives Virginia some NIL money. There are other corporations that do it. Roback.
There you go. We both have it on.
We got our doggies right here.
We love you, Roback.
Yeah. They've had some NIL deals with some Virginia athletes and will continue to do so, I believe. So there are things going on. Again, we're not privy to those numbers. They don't have to give them to us. And so we don't know for sure what those numbers are.
Rob follows up. He says, and we talked about this last week, Rob. This is a good comment from you. Much like Coach Tony Bennett, who uses a unique system and masters it, the key for Virginia football getting back to relevancy is to use a unique offense. Kitching's smash-mouth offense with a poor offensive line and lower-ranked recruits could very well lead to a winless year in 2023. We made the comparison, Rob, and we appreciate your comment. We know you know sports, to what Wake Forest is doing. Wake Forest has got similar headwinds and challenges that UVA has. Small school, academic standards. Football may not necessarily be the priority at Wake Forest, may not be the priority here at UVA. Unique system at Wake Forest. Is he right? Is he right in that Virginia needs some trickeration, some misdirection, some single wing to potentially compete and to keep their opponents on their heels and off guard?
Well, that was the philosophy of John Oliver and Craig Littlepage when they brought in Bronco Mendenhall to bring in a program with a system that was different to prepare for, with Robert and I's passing game. Although it was a lot more balanced attack than people gave it credit for.
He threw some read option in there.
Yeah, and there was a lot of, you have a quarterback that runs the ball a lot with Bryce Perkins and Brennan Armstrong. They both were Virginia's leading rushers for almost every year that those guys were in the system. Wake Forest runs a very, very unique offense. It's very difficult to prepare for, and very few people have shut it down. They led the ACC in scoring last year. Who would ever expect Wake Forest to do that? They had a really good quarterback who's now at Notre Dame, and they've had good quarterbacks in their system. But it's it depends on what you believe in. Some people believe that you have to do, if you're a program like that, you have to bring in uniqueness that makes people work hard to prepare for you. We don't know yet if this system's going to work. It's sort of a blend of what Clemson did and some of what Des Kitchings had experienced in various stops along the way. I don't know that we have seen the full brunt of what this offense can do because, like last year, it just didn't click. We don't know if it will this year. We'll see. I believe that there is some truth to the fact that if you're in Virginia's situation, you probably should try to run something different. I think that's one of the reasons that they brought in Tony Bennett, because he brought in something that's very unique to college basketball and
Pack
the way
line.
he runs his system. Pack line defense, which is a huge part of his success, and a slower-paced offense that wears people out, tries their patience. Sometimes it doesn't work, but people have to go out of their way to prepare for it. And if you're not prepared for it, it's going to eat you alive. It's going to, like a python, it's going to wrap around your neck slowly and choke you to death. So there's different philosophies on that. I can see where Oliver and Little Page were coming from, and I can see Ray's point of view. It's to be determined, I guess, as to whether this is going to work or not.
This question, Stephanie's wondering why we're opening with Tennessee with so many unknowns on the roster.
I think it's probably for a payday, would be my guess, because this game was not on the schedule. Tennessee was supposed to open up the season against BYU in this game, and then BYU joined the Big 12 and had to rearrange their schedule, opted out of the Tennessee game. Tennessee was looking for an opponent. Virginia essentially sold a home game to go out there and play. They'll probably get a nice big paycheck out of this. I'm imagining they would probably make more money in a road game getting playing in Nashville than they would if they played at home, because Scott Stadium sits half empty for games and you're losing $1 million plus per home date. And so
Is that the number?
yes, more than $1 million for home games when they don't attract more than half capacity. And so they'll make a good paycheck, I imagine, by playing this game at Tennessee. And that goes into the coffers, which I'm sure Virginia needs.
Christopher's watching in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a follow-up to what you just said. Does the game day experience need to change for Virginia to get more butts in the seats? We understand the product is what it is on the football field, to steal a line from Al Groh, but it can do other things, food, beverage, and other attractions on game day to get fans back at Scott Stadium. You see a lot of this with pro sports in North Carolina. Should UVA do stuff like that?
Well, that used to be the $64,000 question. Now I guess it's the $64 million question, right? Virginia knows all this. They've tried to experiment, I think, with various food services and bringing in some other people for food, doing attractions for the kiddies, face painting, stuff like that.
We take our boys, my wife and I, to Davenport for Virginia baseball, and it's as much for me about watching a baseball game as it is for our 5-year-old. Our 9-month-old's not doing this, but our 5-year-old loves the bounce house.
Right.
Loves the ice cream.
Yeah.
Loves walking around the stadium trying to catch a foul ball and playing with the other kids. And that enjoyment he receives, and the fact that he's not pestering me and my wife, is why we go to Davenport.
Well, I'm sure they have some of that over at Scott Stadium. I'm in the press box 2 hours before the game, so I don't know what's going on out in the stands. And I've never sat in the stands. I have no clue. I'm just go by what people tell me. They sell alcohol at the stadium now. They've been doing that for a few years, hoping to attract that and keep people from staying out in the parking lot tailgating or going out at halftime and not coming back. That's been a problem for a long time, and even winning, I thought winning would be enough to bring people in. But if you go back a couple of years ago when Virginia was winning,
the stadium still was
they brought
25% empty.
They brought Notre Dame in here, for goodness sakes. Notre Dame sold out everywhere they goes. They couldn't sell out that night game with Notre Dame, for goodness sake. Notre Dame was a top 10 team. And I know Brendan Armstrong didn't play. Nobody thought he was. Well, there was some question mark as to whether he would play.
Jay Woolfolk, I believe, his first start in college football.
Yeah, and he did as well as he could under the circumstances. Again, a freshman. Going back to that question earlier about Tony Muskett, I mean, you want a freshman to start against Tennessee? I don't think so. But I mean, what is it going to take? I don't know what it's going to take. I know that a long time ago they made a huge mistake, and I know that at some point they were going to have to do it. It's when they had a reseeding in Scott Stadium, and they uprooted hundreds of loyal, longtime Virginia fans.
That literally just came in the feed. UVA killed a lot of faithful when they basically put generational season tickets up for bid in the 90s and 2000s.
Yes, it was in the 2000s. It was during the Algro era. I'm sure Algro didn't like it. I think it was the year they opened up with Southern Cal here. But that was an unforgivable sin at the time, because Virginia was having some success. They were drawing pretty good crowds. The school got a little greedy. Some of those people have never forgiven them, have never come back, and swore they will never come back. And that's the most loyal part of your fan base, people who sat through years and years of horrible football. I'm talking about pre-George Welsh, back when people just showed up to Virginia to party, or you had a loyal core of people who were there and enjoyed watching Virginia football, even though they were getting their brains beaten out every weekend. And they were the butt of every college football joke in the country before George Welsh. They had 2 winning seasons in 29 years. Those people were there thick and thin, rain or shine. You don't take those people and discard them like that and expect it to not have some major impact on your program. If they had never done that, they wouldn't be getting some of the big money maybe they would have by selling those seats, but they would have a lot better crowds than they are having at Scott Stadium now, when the TV cameras pan over part of the stadium and it's half empty. That doesn't look good to recruits or anybody else. So I don't know what the answer is. I really don't. I don't know that even if you try to make peace with those people and get them to come back, I don't know. I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if it's giving tickets away or giving tickets at an incredibly reduced rate to get fannies in the seats. I would rather sell tickets for $5 and have 50,000 people there than
100%.
sell them for $60 and have 25,000 people there. But that's me. I don't run the budget like Carla Williams and her group has to do. So
I'd rather give the tickets away to frontline workers and teachers and nurses and literally give them to free tickets than have empty seats where ESPN, the ACC network, like you said, shows the stadium and it's empty.
Yeah.
It's not good for the image.
No, it's not. And it doesn't help you recruiting either, because if you're coming to a Virginia game and then you're going to Virginia Tech or NC State or Maryland or Penn State, and you go to those stadiums and they're sold out, and you come here and there's 30,000, 34,000 people there, that's not going to make a very good impression on those kids. Even if you are closer to their home, they want to play in front of big crowds and have some excitement.
James Watson watching the program. He's a diehard UVA fan. James, here's a stat for you. Viewers and listeners, this stat really took me aback here. Virginia football, with their home football games, losing $1 million plus per home football game. That is really percolating here on all the social channels. Stephanie said what you described happened to her in-laws. They will not go back to Scott Stadium even if we offer them a free ticket, because they were displaced during that generational shift of season ticket holders.
You don't know how many people come up to me.
And I've said that?
And grocery stores, restaurants, golf course, supermarket, gas lines, wherever, and have told me that over the years, that very same story. And I get emails, I get text, I get DMs on Twitter all the time from people who have that similar story. And I don't know what you do. I don't know what Virginia can do. I would try to do something to appease them and try to get some of them back. You may not ever be able to get them back. it sounds like to me Virginia has just said, okay, they've accepted the fact those people aren't coming back and are just trying to get new fans. And I know they've tried various ways to do that. Carla Williams and her marketing department and people, that's a major problem that they've tried to solve and have been confronted with. I don't know what the answer is. They've probably talked to consultants in college football with a college football expertise on how to do that, but I don't know what works and what doesn't. I don't know if there is a solution other than winning. And we just talked about, even Bronco had a couple of really nice seasons in a row, and they still had difficulty filling seats. So I don't know if it's going to take something like another George Welsh to come in and win year after year after year and spring some upsets and play in some bowl games and win. I don't know. That goes above my pay grade. I just don't know what this answer is. And good luck to Carla on trying to figure that out.
I think you've offered fantastic suggestions. Here are more suggestions. This is from Johnny Ornalis, the owner of Guadalajara and El Mariachi.
I go to Guadalajara all the time. I was there last night.
You were there last night?
Yes, I was.
I love it. I love it. Johnny Ornalis says this. This is what you do. You lower the cost of tickets, you increase volume at games, and guess what? You get a full stadium, and those fans spend money in the stadium, then you make money. He's offering a suggestion on how you recoup $1 million plus of not even lost revenue. They're operating in the red for home football games, this UVA football program, this athletic department. I think that's a fantastic suggestion, one you've touched on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it works. I mean, he's a businessman. He knows more about making money than I do. But I mean, what's it going to hurt to try? I mean, it's not. Is it really costing Virginia anything if they offer some really cheap tickets?
I mean, heck, that's what the baseball program's doing.
Yeah.
Baseball program is literally offering free tickets to kids, offering free tickets to frontline workers, to teachers.
As long as they come with an adult.
As long as they come with an adult,
they're selling a ticket to an adult.
And guess what? When my wife and I come with our boys, I'm getting a couple of beers. We're getting hot dogs. My kids getting some kind of ice cream. We still end up spending $60 or $70.
Yeah, and you're going to you got to make money one way or the other, and that's a way of doing it. I mean, again, what does Virginia have to lose? I would rather sell $5 tickets and have 50,000 people there screaming their heads off than to have 35,000 paying $60 or $70 a ticket. I don't know. I mean, maybe that doesn't work out financially. You're still going to sell the expensive seats to the hardcore people, but to fill up the other seats, $5 is better than nothing. The old song in the Tin Cup from a band is a little bit is better than nada. Sometimes you want the whole enchilada.
Hootie Ratcliffe, pop culture.
Come on, what's it going to hurt? Give it a try.
Amen, brother. Amen. How about a introduction with Coach Rudd, our UVA defensive coordinator? 8 starters returning. If there's a positive aspect of this team to latch on to, I think it could be on the defensive side of the ball.
Oh, without question. John Rudzinski was somewhat of a miracle worker last year. I mean, he inherited a defense that was so bad that it caused the whole disruption in Virginia football. Bronco Mendenhall, some people thought Bronco had taken the program as far as he could. I don't know. We'll never know. But that's essentially what caused Bronco to leave, because they wanted him to get rid of his defensive coordinator, and Bronco didn't want to do it. And he was so close to those coaches, and I think he was a little burned out. There's no question about that. I think COVID wore him out. But I think he just didn't have the stomach to fire guys who were like blood brothers to him.
I mean, they moved across the country for him.
Yes, they certainly did. And had that defense been better and Bronco stayed on, and who knows what would have happened. But Rudzinski, everybody thought the defense was going to be terrible last year. Well, they were fourth in the ACC in defensive efficiency and in scoring defense. They were 48th in the nation in scoring defense. They gave up 24 points a game. And if you go by Broncos analytics, if you only give up 24 points in a game, you should be able to have a chance to win that game. And there were games last year when Virginia gave up 24 points or less and still couldn't win because the offense didn't do their part. So, he's got 8 starters returning. I know Chico Bennett, one of those, and he won't play this week because his knee is recovering. But he's got 7 other starters. He's got guys who started at Clemson and started at SMU who transferred in the secondary, Sam Westfall and Malcolm Green. He's got an experienced defensive line. He's got some experienced linebackers. He's got some experienced guys in the secondary. He's got some guys who weren't starters last year but who have started a game and have playing experience. I think, I think they're a year in the system now. I think he didn't have to spend as much time teaching in training camp as he did a year ago. I think he's able to simplify things. Things are a little more cohesive. They know what to expect from him and vice versa. He knows their strengths and weaknesses. And, I think this is the strength of the team. If they can create a few more turnovers, Jerry, and I know that's Chris Slade, one of his big points this training camp, he expects his guys to put more pressure on the quarterback and get more sacks, cause more turnovers. If they can do that, those are game changers sometimes, particularly in close games. If you can get a couple of turnovers, man, it can really change the course of a football game.
Jim Hamlet, watching the program right here in Charlottesville, he says, Hootie, that's exactly what happened to me. I was a season ticket holder for more than 10 years when Sonny Randall was the coach until we moved when George Welsh had some success. I would take free tickets with nowhere to park. I'm seeing this all over the feed. Yeah. Viewers and listeners getting burned here by the money over fans, money over passion. And this is something that you see literally almost every day here from the fans watching this program. This is the hope, viewers and listeners, because we're, glass is half full, especially at the start of the season. The hope is that Coach Elliott implements his system, gets his guys in the mix, and winning, we hope, fixes just about everything. This fan base, if they can return back to Scott Stadium and see a good product on the field, maybe those seats start getting full, but we understand that those ticket prices are quite expensive. Mark Glickman watching the program today as well. I'll tell you what, this Virginia football program, last in the ACC from a preseason standpoint. I'm going to give you the preseason polls, which you vote in. Virginia at the bottom, Boston College right above Virginia, Georgia Tech right above Boston College, Hokies 4th to last, Syracuse 5th to last. The top 5 in the 2003 ACC preseason poll, Clemson as expected, Florida State 2, North Carolina 3, NC State 4, Miami 5. We have an aggregate standing this year.
Right.
No divisions. Which team are you following closely, or which team do you think is going to be, it's hard to argue against Clemson. What team could contend with the Tigers?
Yeah, I think Clemson was a no-brainer. Some people picked Florida State as an upset pick. And Florida, I think if anybody's going to unseat Clemson, it'll be Florida State.
Florida State got 67 first-place votes.
They have a tremendous amount of returning production from their offensive and defensive side of the football. They had one of the best recruiting classes in the nation last year. They had one of the best transfer portal years of anybody in the country. So they've got the talent. There's no question about it. They've recruited well, even though their results have not been that great in recent years. They turned it around last year. We'll see if they can continue that success. An early game this week with LSU, I think, is in Tallahassee. That will tell us a little bit because both those teams have high aspirations. Some people believe Carolina or NC State may be in the mix. I find it hard to pick against anybody being in the championship game outside of Clemson, Florida State. I just don't see it happening. Carolina has Drake May at quarterback, but they have a new offensive coordinator. He lost some of his top playmakers. NC State with Brennan Armstrong and Robert Anae, who knows, maybe they can make some magic happen like they did here a couple years ago, even though if you look at those, even as great as those numbers were that year, Jerry, Virginia was still a 500 football team. So a lot of time passing numbers are losing numbers. So
because you're racking up stats when you're behind.
Yes.
And defenses are in prevent mode, and they're allowing you a lot of stuff under center, a lot of stuff in the middle of the field.
Exactly.
And that's how you get a lot of yardage, a lot of statistics, but they're meaningless statistics late in games.
Exactly. So that's how I see the ACC shaping up. I'm not a believer in Miami. Everybody that's kind of fool's gold, I think, that they think Mario Cristobal is going to win the ACC. I think that's baloney. Everybody gets high on Miami every year, and they just fold. So outside of those four, I'm not sure anybody else can crack that top four.
Which game are you watching in week one the closest? I mean, we got a pretty marquee matchup here, Hootie Ratcliffe and North Carolina, South Carolina. South Carolina is a 2.5-point underdog. It's at a neutral site. The over-under is at 64.5. Carolina, a top 25 football team.
It's in Charlotte. It's a big hub for North Carolina, but also not that far away from Columbia, as we remember when Virginia played South Carolina in the Belk Bowl a few years ago, and the stadium was overrun with South Carolina fans. I think North Carolina will probably win this game, although South Carolina is capable. They've got Spencer Rattler, I believe, at quarterback, who's a very dangerous quarterback. Frank Beamer's son is turning that program around. They beat Tennessee in November last year, which shocked college football. I think it's going to depend on Gene Chizik's defense. He has not had defensive success at Carolina. That's been their Achilles heel. Supposedly that's going to be highly improved. We'll see. Last year, Carolina had to score 40 or 50 points sometimes to win football games because the defense was so bad. If it becomes another high-scoring game like that, it's anybody's game. But I would have to pick Carolina by a couple of points, mostly because of Drake May, but if South Carolina's pressure can get to him and force some mistakes, the Gamecocks could win this game. They have some talent.
How about the top 10 matchup on Sunday night? LSU and Florida State.
I'm going to watch that game.
7:30 kickoff, ABC. It's at a neutral site in Orlando. Nationally televised game. LSU a 2.5-point favorite. Over/under at 58. Hootie. LSU, Florida State, Sunday night. That's a big-time football game.
That should be a fun game to watch. I'm a huge college football fan, always have been, and it's my favorite sport. Sorry, Tony Bennett, but I love basketball too. But college football has always been my favorite sport of anything, and this is the kind of games that make college football fun. I mean, two storied programs going after each other with really good offenses, lots of excitement, pageantry, the whole 9 yards, the horse coming out and throwing the fiery spear in.
Yeah, the fiery spear.
I mean, the tiger at LSU prowling the sideline. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So it should be a fun game. I think either team could win that game. I think you said LSU's a 2-point favorite. I think if Florida State is going to be who they want to be,
they got to win this game.
That's a must-win for them.
Yeah,
because that can take a little confidence away from you if you lose a huge showdown early in the season.
We would be remiss not to highlight the Hokies for the many Hokie fans that are watching this program. Virginia Tech's got Old Dominion, 8 o'clock Blacksburg Saturday night. Monarchs are not a football program to overlook, Hootie.
No, they've struggled a bit in recent years, but I think they're expecting better things at Old Dominion this season. They've beaten the Hokies a couple of times, and so I'm sure they're not going to go in there intimidated. And Tech, like Virginia, has struggled mightily for the last several years. Lane Stadium is a difficult place to play. I'm sure it'll be a pretty rowdy place this weekend. I would think the Hokies would prevail, but
16-point favorites.
If I were a betting man, I would probably put my money on the Hokies to cover that and maybe then some. But you never know. Old Dominion, they came in here a couple of years ago and gave Virginia a tremendous scare. So who knows?
Larry Red Wing giving you some props on Twitter. Retweeting the show and loving what he's seen so far.
Thank you, Larry.
Some closing thoughts. Time flies when you're having fun with a good friend like Hootie Ratcliffe. We're rocking our rowback gear here. We're very passionate about college football, both Hootie and I love sitting across from this guy. Some closing thoughts for your fans there, Hootie.
Couple things. One lady touched on Matt Ganyard and the story.
Oh, yeah, and
that Mike Barber did. I think all of Virginia media, we spent over an hour talking, or close to an hour talking to Matt. Thank Jim Davis and his crew for making him available to us. Everybody in the country's been wanting to interview this guy because it's one of the feel-good stories in college football nationally this year. You're probably going to see it on ESPN and the ACC network and lots of other places before the season's over. We were lucky enough to get this early exposure to him, and he purposely didn't want any interviews until he had something to talk about. He's a team guy. He's an ex-Marine. I haven't read Mike's story because I seldom read any of my fellow colleagues' stories, and I doubt that they read mine. But I did a blowout story on Matt last. I think we talked to him. What day was it? I think it was Thursday. I did my story Thursday night. Very lengthy, in-depth story. You might want to check that one out too. Just a great story. A married guy with 2 kids. Tried out for Virginia's football team in 2009 when Al Groh was head coach. Made all 9 of his kicks that day. Didn't make it. They had 3 other kickers on the squad. He got an email that said, "Sorry to inform you, you did not make the football team." That caused a burning passion in him. He used it as his screensaver on his iPad for years. He saw it every time he turned on his iPad and never lost the dream. But one of these days, I am going to wear orange and blue and kick for Virginia. 8 years in the military, helicopter pilot, sailed for 7 months, Jerry, on a ship in the Mediterranean Sea, the Pacific Ocean. Somewhere along the way, he bought a rubber football, like we get at Myrtle Beach in the junk stores down there or at Nag's Head. Carried it with him on the ship for 7 months. Anytime they were in a port of call, he would go out and find somewhere to kick that football just so he wouldn't go 7 months without kicking a football. He was in Jordan at a soccer field and was kicking the football. Jordanian soldiers came up to him, had no idea what he was doing, and he got them involved. He was in some remote islands off the coast of Thailand, kicking that rubber football.
That's awesome.
I mean, who has passion like that? That's one of the most incredible stories I've ever run across in my career, and that's saying something. And for this guy not to give up on his dream, and he came here last year and enrolled in Darden, hoped to kick last year. Darden's class schedule, which is unbending,
right,
conflicted with Virginia's football practice schedules. Door was closed. He ran out of eligibility. Didn't know if he'd ever get a chance then. It looked like the door was slammed shut. This year, practice schedule didn't conflict with Darden's class schedule. He asked Virginia to appeal for a 6th year of eligibility. It was turned down. They appealed, and it was cleared 4 days before training camp started. He shows up in the Virginia's locker room with 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds. A couple guys knew who he was. Most of them had no idea who this guy was.
He's 34 years old.
34 years old. He doesn't look it, just like you don't look your age. He stood up. Tony Elliott asked him to stand up at the end of the team meeting and introduce himself. And he's been razzed a little bit. They call him Pops. They call him Granddad. They call him Uncle Matt, stuff like that. But he's taken it in good humor, and he's meshed with the players, and they're all behind him. And he may kick off Saturday in Nashville.
That'd be awesome.
He may kick off. He may be the first person to touch the football in Saturday's game. Isn't that a dream story? That
is the stuff of Hollywood scripts.
Yeah. And another point to touch on is we don't want to go by without mentioning ACC expansion.
Oh, yeah?
We told you last week it wasn't dead. It was on life support. But apparently the money is an angle. There's some other angles to it, too. But money, if they add SMU, Cal, Stanford, ESPN will fork over between 50 and 72 million. We see different numbers annually to the ACC to distribute however it wants. Because of that, SMU won't take any of that money for 5 to 7 years. Cal and Stanford would take only like 30% for a few years. They can use that money at their discretion to pay people who are successful in the postseason, keep people like Florida State from barking so much. They can use it for travel expenses, etc. But it's back on the table. They might have met. They were supposed to meet last night by phone. The shooting at North Carolina's campus prevented that out of respect. Sometime this week they will pick it back up and talk about it. I think there's a strong possibility this is going to happen, Jerry.
That seems like a no-brainer to me.
I was going to wear my ACC shirt that we used to get on the football tour every year, and it had a map of the conference back from the 80s when it was just 8 schools or so, and it was just a little map. That map is taking
the whole
country.
Yeah, I know.
So keep your eyes open on that. I think it's going to happen.
You would think that'd be a no-brainer, right, for the conference?
I think it's going to add stability, even if some schools leave. It would keep the ACC as a power. It would keep their Power 5 status, unlike the Pac-12, which is going to probably lose its status, even if those teams do stay. Those 4 teams do stay.
Hootie, this was our best show yet.
I think it was a wonderful show, and a lot of it's because of you guys out there who ask great questions. You're all very knowledgeable football fans, sports fans, and not a single dumb question. They were all great questions, and we appreciate that.
You were on point. Jerry Ratcliffe, the Virginia Sports Hall of Famer, bringing A++ ammunition. The website is jerryratcliffe.com. I'll say it loud and I'll say it proud, jerryratcliffe.com. We're on his website, guys, daily, reading about our Wahoos. You, absolutely phenomenal. This was truly a joy. Judah Wickower, props to you.
He's our hero. He's the guy. He's the Iron Man.
He's the Iron Man over there. Brother from another mother, J-Dubs, thank you kindly for everything that you do with this program. Guys, we are having so much fun covering the ACC and college football. Tuesdays at 10:15 for now. We're on the cusp, potentially another Jerry and Jerry show. Those details to come as they progress in real time.
I could sit here and talk all day.
I can sit here and listen to you all day, Hootie.
And you're right in there, man. You know your stuff.
Thank you, Hootie. Appreciate you. The I Love CVille show, our friends, is up in 52 minutes now. Thank you kindly for joining us on the Jerry and Jerry show. Check out jerryratcliffe.com. And you guys, game day on Saturday. Enjoy the week. Take care. It was awesome, Hootie. It was awesome.